the city of peace and harmony. But finding it again proved harder than he had ever imagined. The man's journey took him far from home. He traveled through many strange foreign lands, and he went to ancient cities that he'd never seen or heard of before. He traveled across burning desert sands and over steep and rugged mountain peaks. He traveled through blinding blizzards and wicked winter storms with whistling winds and bitter biting cold. Still he pressed on and on until exhausted and at the end of his strength, with determination, he finally found Shangri-la. There are some young people in this community who set out on the journey of life, seeking a better place, seeking a way, seeking that lost horizon of success, because far too often in the lives of our young people, success is a lost horizon. And so they travel through difficult sets of circumstances. They travel through broken homes. They travel through poverty. They travel through those places that are striking to a child whose parents might be incarcerated. They travel through the struggles of peer pressure and drug abuse. They travel through the danger of gang violence and being recruited by those gangs. They travel and they come close sometimes to losing their lives. But fortunately, some people from a city called Shangri-la rescue them over and over. Those people work at Matthews Dickey Boys and Girls Club. That's right. And when they come there, they find another way of life. They find discipline and morality. They find patience, and they find love, and they find sensitivity, and they find compassion, and though they may have known it to some extent before, they find it there like never, ever in their lives. They find Shangri-La. But they have to go back to the homes where they live. They have to go back to those lifestyles. Some of them abusive. Many are loving homes with loving parents. But some are very challenging and difficult. But they go back with a perception. They go back recognizing that literacy is possible. They go back realizing that their math grades are better. They go back understanding that kindness and human dignity are things that they deserve. And so they long to go back to the Shangri-La that Matthews Dickey Boys and Girls Club has become in their lives. But it's not always easy. Sometimes they don't have the money for membership. Sometimes they can't find the transportation. Sometimes it's hard. But they find their way back to their Shangri-La. They find their way to that place where they can find peace. And ever since that summer afternoon in 1960, when Martin L. Matthews and the late Hubert Dickey Ballantyne met under a shade tree in Handy Park, they've been mentoring and rescuing boys and girls who needed to find that place of peace and harmony, their lost horizon. These men, Mr. Matthews and Mr. Ballantyne, they may not have been from a hidden city in the Himalayan mountains, but through their compassion and through their commitment to the education, health, and wholeness of the children, and the caring and the hard work of people like Barbara Washington and their dedicated team, more than 40,000 young lives are positively impacted every year at Matthews Dickey Boys and Girls Club. That's right. These are boys and girls who, like that man in the old movie, get a glimpse of Shangri-La through television, or the internet, a better way of life. And they began to see beyond the anger and the anxiety of their communities, beyond its poverty and inequities, beyond its racism, its violence, its danger, beyond its selfishness and insensitivity, beyond its immorality and greed, beyond its limited love and compassion, to a place of confidence, a place of self-esteem, a place where personal achievement is a realizable dream. These are the byproducts of the historic work of Matthews Dickey Boys and Girls Club. It is here where young folk, just like you and me, who, given that extra measure of love and concern, that extra measure of mentoring and motivation, would be able to envision a better life for themselves, a sense of fulfillment, and to learn and become the responsible citizens and global community leaders of tomorrow. In the words of a minister named Mike Murdoch, you must be willing to go where you have never been to create something you never had. Oh, I'm going to say that again. You must be willing to go where you've never been in order to create something that you've never had. There are so many distractions surrounding our young people today that it's easy for them to lose focus. It's easy for them to forget that there is a city of success. There is a lost horizon that can be found, and that with a little help, they can find it. It's called Matthews Dickey Boys and Girls Club. They're engaged at that club in preparing leaders for tomorrow. And preparing leaders for tomorrow involves this kind of journey today, because seeing our children achieve success, watching them transform their community and their world as they reach their highest goals, witnessing the fulfillment of their leadership dreams is Shangri-la. It is a paradise for them and for those of us who have helped along the way. I can't tell you how good it feels to see someone successful after I helped them a few years back. I can know the joy that a teacher must have, taking a child from the first to the sixth grade, and then years later, seeing them run for a public office and win the public trust and lead the nation. I can't imagine what it must be like for that elementary school teacher, for that Boys and Girls Club director, for that athletic director, for that person in the Boys and Girls Club in Chicago, Illinois, that taught Barack Obama. And when they watched him take the highest office in the land, how they must have felt. How they must have felt. Well, that same kind of joy just swells through Matthews Dickey Boys and Girls Club, because time and time again they see those young faces grow up. Over the last 40-some years, they've watched them grow and become contributing members to a burgeoning and successful community. They've watched them do good things, and they've watched them come back and help Matthews Dickey Boys and Girls Club over and over again. In fact, some have graduated from there and came back and are still there today. God is so good in blessing this club in that way. They're preparing leaders for tomorrow. So many of our young people today want their gratification to be immediate. Oh yeah, they want it right away. It's about instant pancakes. It's about a buffet. It's never about working, earning it, going to the store, buying it, and then piece by piece preparing it. But we've got to teach our young people that some of the old ways are still good ways, because it teaches us how to do all the work. There's nobody as successful, to me, in my mind, as the person who started in the mailroom and became the CEO. It takes years of hard work, but along the way, that individual learns how to do every job in the company. Years ago, I worked for a company called Riker Electronics. I started at Riker when I was having some issues. I was about 19 or 20 years old. I was struggling to find myself. After getting mustered out of the United States Air Force, where I really wanted to be a gung-ho helicopter pilot. I had scored 98 on their entrance exam, and they said, you can do anything. The only thing I couldn't do, that's right. Yeah. No! The only thing I couldn't do was stay in the Air Force because I had a murmur, and they found it. They found my heart problem, and in 5.5 weeks, 2 days before I was going to get veterans benefits, they put me out of the Air Force. I was mad. I was depressed for a year. I was going through all kind of changes. I wanted to be a pilot. Let's not think about the fact that I would have been shipped immediately to Vietnam to fly helicopters right over there. On the positive side, by the way, I did become a pilot, and I still have my license in my pocket. But I went through some changes, and I couldn't find myself. And I was working as a waiter at a dive restaurant and bar, and I finally went to this electronics company called Riker Electronics, and I got a job as a pickup delivery boy. I would pick up supplies across town and bring them back, and then I asked them for a little extra work in order to make some extra money. And they handed me a broom and said, after your shift is over, take an hour and sweep this place up. Well, having had no job at one point, any job was good to me at that time. I said, yes, sir, I'll be happy to sweep. So I took the broom, and after work, I swept around the place. And as I went past every bench, I said, what are you doing? And they said, well, I'm a wirer, and I'm soldering these electronic components on this board. I said, oh. I swept a little further, and I went into another room. I said, what do you do? Well, we're the stock room. And what we do in here is we make sure we have all the components that the engineers ask for to make this electronic signal generator for television. I said, oh. And I swept a little further. And I said, what do you do in here? They said, well, we create the blueprints for the electronic systematics that build the things that we build in this factory. I swept on, and I went into engineering, and I said, what are those monitors you have? Now, these are our sync monitors, and they let us know what our generated signals are from the electronics that we prepare. And I said, oh. So about a week later, after sweeping the floors and picking up in delivery, they said, we'd like somebody to help out in the blueprint room. I said, I'll do it. I made blueprints once. And I spent a month in the blueprint room. And then they ran short in the stock room. I said, I know what goes on in there because I asked somebody. And my mentors helped me to know. And I went in the stock room for 3 months. And then I was in the stock room, and they said, listen, would you help us do some wiring later? Oh, yes, I know what this component is. This is a transistor, this is a resistor, and this is a capacitor. And little by little, I worked my way through every department until they finally wanted an engineering trainee. And I said, I'll try it. And I passed the test, and they hired me to become an electrical engineering trainee for video. I did that for 6 months, and they made me, they made me a field operator. And I started going around to electronics companies and television stations, fixing the equipment that we built at Riker Video. 12 months after I started there, I was a field engineer, and I started pushing a broom. Come on, somebody, say amen. And then when I found out what they were making, trying to fix this equipment that they couldn't fix, that only I could fix over at ABC, I said, oh my Lord. Y'all are making some money over here. And I quit Riker and I went to ABC Television. And it was while I was at ABC Television that I got bit by the bug for show business. The rest is history. But what am I saying? I'm saying from humble beginnings that these young people face at Matthews Dickey Boys and Girls Club, this education, this volunteerism that helps and changes their lives, it can positively impact them for years. And the success can be immeasurable. That's what I'm trying to say. You see, champions don't become champions with one swing. They're merely recognized in the ring. Their becoming happens in their daily routine. The quality of preparation determines the quality of performance. Someone once defined success as preparation meeting opportunity. Pastor Chuck Swindoll writes that being a leader means stepping out alone. Discovering new horizons means having a different vision from everyone else. Being a part of a minority rather than a majority. And there's a Bible story that relates how spies were sent out to report on the opposition in Canaan land. And the first scouts reported that there are giants in the land and we were like grasshoppers in their eyes. But Joshua and Caleb, men of vision, leaders and men who had experienced and had faith, said, we'll go and take another report. And when they came back, they said, we can win. With God on our side, we can win. They were men of vision, of positive perspective. They had the qualities of leadership that Matthews Dickey Boys and Girls Club instills in its members and friends through its programs and leadership. They had the right attitude. It's like ABC. They had a positive rather than a negative attitude. They weren't pessimistic. B, they had belief. When they have vision, you have assurance and confidence, not only in God, but in others and in yourself. C, they had capacity. When you have vision, you demonstrate a willing capacity to be stretched. A rubber band is never used until it's stretched. They had determination. When you're determined, you dig into the trenches and face the hand-to-hand combat of struggling through life's problems. And E, they had enthusiasm. You embrace the enthusiastic perspective that you've got friends at Matthews Dickey in your corner fighting for you. An American was visiting France, and he came upon a scene where a large church was being erected. He approached 3 stonemasons, one after the other, and each he asked the question, "What are you doing?" The first replied, "I'm cutting a stone." The second said, "I'm cutting a stone for 7 francs a day." The third responded, "I'm helping to build a cathedral." Can you see the cathedrals through the challenges that life sets before you? Or do you just see a lot of rough stones? Martin Matthews was able to see the cathedrals through the rough stones that walked through his door. He was able to see the success stories long before success was ever in view. Leaders have positive perspectives, and leadership begins in one's mind. In order to prepare leaders for tomorrow, we must live out that leadership before them today. You see, our children learn more from what we do than what we say. Oh, I know somebody needs to say amen. We need to show them right from wrong, not just tell them. We need to use management skills in our families. Conflict resolution rather than conflict escalation. Fiscal responsibility, communication skills, and effective peer interaction. And all those perceived qualities that they will need to become effective leaders. If they suffer from limited vision, it's most likely caused by the nearsighted influence that we have either given to them, which we've allowed them to be exposed. Honesty, integrity, morality, and generosity, those fundamental, foundational character traits that are essential to living a fulfilled and meaningful life, are the same basic traits that are foundational to building a great leader. And beyond this, leadership can be learned from the proven and effective skills of principles of successful leaders of our time. Very quickly, I want to share with you that in the book Lasting Leadership, Makul Pandya and Robbie Shell have gathered a wealth of information from proven leaders of our time in corporate America, some of which I'm pleased to share with you very quickly tonight. George Soros, the CEO of Quantum, second largest hedge fund in the world, led his company to such phenomenal success because he was able to see the hurricane from the butterfly wings. What? What do you mean? Well, quite simply, it means observe the world around you. Play by the rules and watch for signs when the rules are changing. Then play by the new rules before the other guy does. Once more, the principle of integrity is identified as a mantra of great leaders. Tiger Woods, playing in the PGA Championship today, was trying to play with this wind howling all around him. But constantly, he played by the rules, and constantly, he's observing the wind. On every shot, you see him looking at the tops of the trees. You see him watching the way the waves on the ponds are blowing. You see him watching the bulrushes along the river. You see him throwing grass into the air, because the way the wind is blowing will affect the way you play the game. Oh, I know I'm talking to somebody. If you can pay attention and teach your children to observe the flutter of the butterfly wings, to observe the way cows are facing into the wind, to observe the way birds are landing, if you can see all of that, then you'll understand when the storm is coming. You'll be able to see when trouble is around the corner, and you can avoid it.